ให้มีการนำเสนอนะครับในส่วนของเนื้อหาตรงนี้ที่จะเป็นประโยชน์กับหน่วยงานท่านต่อไปนะครับก็ขออนุญาตเริ่มต้นโดยคุณสตีฟก่อนเลยครับSteve, please give an introduction to this event.
Sure, thank you. Swadikap. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Steve Ledzian. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for FireEye Mandiant in Asia Pacific. And before we introduce our panelists this morning, I'd like to just share with you a little bit about who Mandiant is. You might not have heard of Mandiant before. And so I'd like to give you a quick introduction so you can understand Mandiant as an organization. We all know that we work very hard to try and prevent cyber attacks from happening. But the stark reality is that all it takes for someone to break into an organization is to have someone in that organization click on something they shouldn't. That results in an intrusion that is essentially inevitable. And I think the security community understands this today, that prevention is not enough. And you can see this idea baked into zero trust. One of the principal tenets of zero trust is to assume breach, meaning assume that an intrusion will occur. That doesn't mean that assume you will lose, right? The attacker breaking into the network is just the first step. And it's that step which is very hard to prevent 100% effectively. Well, when there are intrusions, companies have questions, and they'll have more questions than answers. If you ever find yourself in a cyber attack crisis, the types of questions your business will have will be business questions, not technical questions. You'll want to know things like, what did the attacker steal from us? How long has the attacker been inside our network without us knowing? How did the attacker get in the first place? What data does the attacker have access to? Is it data on unimportant workstations and laptops, or is it the data on the servers? What accounts does the attacker control? Does the attacker control any administrator accounts? Why is the attacker doing this? What is their motivation, and who is the attacker? And how do we kick the attacker out? And if you notice, all those questions are about attacker, not about malware. Right? Yes, malware is part of the problem, but the bigger problem is a remote attacker inside of the network, a human attacker. And these answers are critical to get for the organizations who need to make decisions on how to respond to the attack. And just ask yourself, today, do any of your security technologies answer these questions? Does a firewall tell you what was stolen from you? Right? And so there can be very long periods of time, hours or days that go by where the organization is trying to understand what happened, trying to understand what to do about it in the absence of having these answers. And this is what Mandiant does. Mandiant is all about understanding what happened, what to do about it. It's all about getting the answers to these urgent business questions quickly in a time of crisis. And we call this process incident response, right? When there is a victim of cyber attack, Mandiant comes to help those victims to get those answers. Mandiant's been around for a long time. We were founded in 2004, and we're a global team. We have over 300 of these incident response consultants around the world. One of the things that you need to know when you're trying to answer those questions is you need to know about the bad guys. Is this a cyber criminal organization after money, or is it a government hacking organization that's after spying or espionage? We have a large intelligence organization, researchers and analysts alike, over 260 across the globe, speaking over 30 languages. Last year, we did over 1,000 of these incident response engagements. So more than about 3 times a day, a victim of a cyber attack calls Mandiant and says, help, I've been victimized, help me understand what happened and what to do about it. Mandiant has a local presence in Thailand, and we support and coordinate with all sorts of organizations around the world. And I want to share with you 3 quick stories, some of the most notable stories in Mandiant's history, to give you an idea of the level of import of the things that we work on. And one happened 8 years ago. It was 2013. It was the story of APT-1. Now, when I say APT means Advanced Persistent Threat. And this is sort of a code word. It's a polite way to say it's a government-sponsored hacker. So that your adversary, the hacker here, is a country's government, right? So APT-1 is a government hacker. And this was the first attribution of an APT actor by Mandiant. We released a report, still available today, freely available, called APT-1, exposing one of China's cyber espionage units. And it was aligned to People's Liberation Army Unit 61398. This resulted in May of 2014 of a US Department of Justice indictment. An indictment is a formal accusation of crime against 5 Chinese military hackers for computing hacking and economic espionage, as well as other offenses. These were those 5 officers who were indicted by the US Department of Justice. And this brought awareness. Essentially what was happening was APT-1 was hacking into organizations, stealing intellectual property, and bringing it back for use within their country, right? So a country is benefiting by stealing intellectual property. Over time, more time passed, June of 2015, at the highest levels of government, this problem was recognized and there were calls to address it. Let me play a short video for you on some of that government calls to address this problem.
We believe very strongly that the United States and China should be working together to develop and implement a shared understanding of appropriate state behavior in cyberspace.
Right, cyberspace at that time, cyber hacking was quite new. There weren't many rules about what is okay and is not okay. And there were calls for defining what is allowed and what isn't allowed. And in September 2015, there was a historic agreement between the US President Obama and the Chinese President Xi around, in principle, that governments don't engage in cyber espionage for commercial gain against companies. Meaning that, yes, you know, spying will still happen for government purposes, but we shouldn't steal the intellectual property of customers. That shouldn't be an effort of government in both directions. And so that was a very notable agreement that came out of the awareness and the calls for action to this. And so in some small way, this all started with that Mandiant APT-1 report. And that was recognized by the US government in April of 2017. At that time, there was a congressional hearing on a totally different cyber incident, and that was the interference in US elections. And in that hearing, there was an acknowledgement of the APT-1 report and the outcome that it helped to generate. Let me play this short video for you as well.
Senator Feinstein.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Kevin Mandy, it's good to see you again. I want you to know how much your China report was appreciated, and you spoke before this committee, and I think everybody very much appreciated it, and I think it had some good results. So thank you very much.
Of course, Kevin Mandia is the CEO of FireEye Mandiant. Let's move to a more modern story. This happened in year 2020, and this is the story of Triton. Some of you may have heard of the story of Stuxnet, a very well-known attack on critical infrastructure. This also is an attack on critical infrastructure. And it began in 2017 when Mandiant responded through an incident response to an attack on what are called safety instrumented systems. These are OT networks, operational technology networks, and they control machinery. It's computers that control machinery. And that machinery, of course, can, if it is hacked, can cause a physical impact in the real world. And to make sure things like that don't happen, that physical machinery has what are called these SIS systems, these safety instrumented systems. So if those safety instrumented systems are like a backup, if they detect that anything is going wrong, they can safely shut those systems down. Well, this was a hack against those safety systems themselves. In June of 2018, we released a second part of this report talking about the amount of effort that it would take to understand these systems at a level where you're able to manipulate them. It is not easy to do. A lot of the information isn't public, and a lot of that effort and a lot of work had to be put in to be successful. In October of 2018, we got further information that this intrusion activity was related to a what's called the Central Scientific Research Institute of Chemistry and Mechanics. This is a Russian government-owned technical research institute located in Moscow. So this is essentially tying these attacks on safety systems with an APT threat actor, with a government threat actor. In April of 2019, we saw a second attack against a second organization using these Triton attacks on the safety systems. In December 2017, Wired released an article called "The Unprecedented Malware That Targeted Industrial Safety Systems." And our executive vice president of Mandiant Intelligence, that 260-person team around the globe, commented on this as well. Let me play a short video for you of her comments on these Triton attacks.
They used Triton malware. And the thing that was really disconcerting about this was that it wasn't just about espionage or anything like that. They actually targeted the safety systems of an ICS plant. And that means that that was the last step. I mean, the safety systems at an ICS facility are the last thing between, that risks human life.
Right. And so that was quite an impactful attack as well. And then in October of 2020, almost, about a year ago now, the US government formally sanctioned that research institute, right? And so again, the US government took actions as a result of this potentially fatal Triton malware against this organization. One last story before we introduce the panel, and this is a story of supply chain attacks. And this one happened very recently. This happened at the end of December, beginning of 2021. And let me start with the news clip and to set the stage for this attack.
And we are learning more about what may be the worst cyber attack in history. As Kevin Mandiant is the CEO of FireEye. His company was the first one to discover that this massive breach happened.
So this was an attack that didn't attack an individual organization. It attacked a software vendor, and it implanted malware into that software vendor's product. And as that software vendor published their software to their customers, that malware then spread to all of their customers because it was embedded. So this is what we call a supply chain attack. And this again was an APT actor, a nation state actor. It was branded as the most impactful cyber attack ever. It was probably the most stealthy cyber attack ever. Yet FireEye and Mandiant were able to discover it, right? So this is at a high level, some of the things we work on. Often when we are responding to victims, we get to learn things about the attackers. And one of the things we learn about the attackers is what other victims they have. And sometimes what we can do is take those other victims and understand them and contact them and tell them, hey, you may not know this, but we believe you're either a target or you might already even be breached by a threat actor without knowing it. And so we share that information as a courtesy. And we call that program our victim notification program. And within Thailand, we've been doing victim notifications as well. You can see over the last 6 months, there's a couple of dozen victim notifications that Mandiant has performed in Thailand. And so we help those organizations, we share the intelligence and the information that we have learned so that they can take action to protect themselves before they're impacted by a meaningful cyber attack. Maybe before we pass to introduce the panel, can someone help to maybe give a quick summary on in local language?
คุณนุ้ยเชิญเลยครับ
ค่ะก็อย่างที่ทางสตีฟได้มีโอกาสแชร์นะคะส่วนนุ้ยเองก็พิชาวีวราโพคินนะคะก็ดูแล operation ในเมืองไทยนะคะทั้งไฟไอแล้วก็แมนเดียนต้องเรียนว่าสิ่งที่สตีฟได้มีการแชร์ไปนะคะเป็นประสบการณ์ตรงที่ทางแมนเดียนเนี่ยได้เข้าไปมีส่วนร่วมในการที่จะช่วยเหลือลูกค้าทั้งในแง่ของ incident response รวมถึงการวาง infrastructure แล้วก็ architecture เพื่อสร้างความมั่นคงแล้วก็สร้างรากฐานที่ดีเกี่ยวกับเรื่องของ Cybersecurity นะคะจากที่เห็นเนี่ยคือเราจะสังเกตได้ว่าปัจจุบันเนี่ยเราเจอransom หรือจะเจอ attack ที่เกิดจากเรื่องของ ransom ค่อนข้างเยอะแล้วที่สำคัญเนี่ยปัญหาที่เราเจอทุกวันนี้เนี่ยไม่ใช่ว่าเป็น ransom ประเภทไหนแต่สำคัญอยู่ที่ว่าเขาต้องการอะไรจากเราแล้วเราจะรับมือกับปัญหาเหล่านั้นอย่างไรนะคะเพราะฉะนั้นจะสังเกตว่าปัญหาที่เราเกิดทุกวันนี้เนี่ยทุกครั้งที่เกิด ransom จะมีคำถามว่าเอ๊ะแล้วมันเข้ามาทางไหนเข้ามาเมื่อไหร่เข้ามาได้ยังไงเข้ามานานแล้วแค่ไหนนะคะแล้วที่สำคัญคือเขาเป็นใครล่ะและเขาต้องการอะไรจากเราเพราะฉะนั้นสิ่งต่างๆเหล่านี้ค่ะคำถามเราต่างๆเหล่านี้เนี่ยวันนี้เราจะมีการไขคำตอบกันนะคะซึ่งอย่างที่เรียนตอนต้นคือเดี๋ยวเราก็จะมีทางผู้เชี่ยวชาญทางด้านต่างๆของแมนเดียนซึ่งวันนี้เนี่ยเป็นครั้งแรกที่ทางแมนเดียนนะคะได้ดึงผู้เชี่ยวชาญแต่ละด้านแต่ละหน่วยงานในบริษัทเองมาให้ข้อมูลแล้วก็ความรู้กับผู้เข้าชมการบรรยายทุกท่านนะคะคราวนี้นอกจากนี้แล้วเนี่ยจะสังเกตว่าexpertise ของเราเนี่ยมี globally นะคะสิ่งที่เราทำคือเราดีลกับปัญหาเหล่านี้เนี่ยตลอดเวลานะคะ24/7ไม่ว่าจะอยู่ประเทศอะไรเราก็จะมีทีมที่ทำงานแล้วก็รับเคสต่างๆเหล่านี้ดูแลความปลอดภัยให้กับลูกค้าในขณะเดียวกันเมืองไทยเราก็จะมีทีมงานที่เป็นทั้ง Sales Pre-Sales นะคะที่คอยช่วยเหลือแล้วก็ดูแลลูกค้าในกรณีที่ปัจจุบันนี้เนี่ยมีvictim เยอะมากสิ่งที่เราทำอีกด้านหนึ่งคือเราจะมีลักษณะของเป็นเราเรียกว่าเป็น victim notification นะคะเนื่องจากว่าเราเป็น front line เราอยู่หน้างานกับลูกค้าเนี่ยฉะนั้นเราจะเห็นว่า activity ที่อยู่ใน dark web หรือว่าอยู่ในเห็นความผิดปกติละกันนะคะเพราะฉะนั้นสิ่งต่างๆเหล่านี้เนี่ยเราจะมีการ feedback กลับมาหาลูกค้าโดยตรงด้วยว่าเราเจออะไรบ้างแล้วสิ่งที่ลูกค้าควรจะทำอะไรเช่นในแง่ของ compromise assessment หรือว่าในแง่ของ service ต่างๆเนี่ยตรงนี้เนี่ยก็เป็นเรียกว่าเป็นคำแนะนำที่เราสามารถให้ได้ด้วยเหมือนกันจากที่สตีฟพูดไปเมื่อสักครู่จะเห็นว่าในแต่ละเดือนเนี่ยเราเจอ victim notification เยอะมากหลายครั้งหลายองค์กรอาจจะมองว่า victim notification เนี่ยมันจริงหรือเปล่านะคะหรือว่ามันเกี่ยวข้องอะไรกับเราบางท่านอาจจะมีการแบบไม่ได้ใส่ใจมันมากนะคะแต่อย่าลืมว่าเหตุการณ์เหล่านั้นเนี่ยการเกิด victim notification เบื้องต้นเนี่ยเป็นที่มาของ ransom ในกรณีใหญ่ๆหลายกรณีนะคะเพราะฉะนั้นอยากให้ทุกท่านที่เข้าฟังการบรรยายอยู่ครั้งนี้เนี่ยลองให้ความใส่ใจแล้วก็หากเกิดมีอะไรผิดปกติในแง่ขององค์กรหรือมีการ notify กลับมาเนี่ยซึ่งตรงนี้เราก็ร่วมกับสกมช.นะคะในการที่เราจะมีการแชร์เรื่องของ victim notification ผ่านทางสกมช.เพื่อที่จะ reach out กับหน่วยงานต่างๆอันนี้ก็อยากฝากไว้นะคะเป็นอีกเรื่องนึงที่น่าสนใจมากๆเพราะว่าหลายครั้งเราเห็นเลยค่ะว่าเหตุการณ์ใหญ่ๆเนี่ยเกิดจากการเข้ามาแบบเรียกว่าดูไม่ได้ significant แต่ impact ที่เกิดขึ้นวันที่เราถูก encrypt data แล้วเราถูกเรียกค่าไถ่แล้วเนี่ยถึงวันนั้นเนี่ยเป็นเรื่องยาวที่ใหญ่สำหรับ business decision ที่จะต้องตัดสินใจว่าจะต้องเดินต่ออย่างไรนะคะอันนั้นก็เป็นภาพรวมนะคะในส่วนของ Mandiant เดี๋ยวเราคงได้ฟังต่อแล้วก็มีการบรรยายมีการถามตอบนะคะท่านใดมีคำถามก็ถามเข้ามาในแชทได้เลยเดี๋ยวทางพี่มอนกับหลังบ้านก็จะช่วยกันตอบคำถามนะคะ
Thank you. So without further ado, let's meet our panelists. And we can walk through one at a time to introduce yourself. Nui, is there anything further you'd like to say about your role? Mandiant?
Sure. Thanks so much, Steve. Thanks for the introduction, and it's very fortunate for having all of us here. And I would like to thank you for NCSA as well to having us here today, having us as your partnership to building the strong cybersecurity capability for the critical infrastructure and other organizations as well. ขออนุญาตปรับมุมเป็นภาษาไทยนะคะ โอเคก็วันนี้นะคะอย่างที่สตีฟกับทางพี่มอแล้วก็ทางพลโทดร.ปรัชญาได้แจ้งไปตอนต้นคือทางทีม Mandiant เองเนี่ยค่ะก็อยากจะขอบคุณทางทีมสกมช.นะคะที่วันนี้ให้โอกาสพวกเราทุกท่านนะคะได้มีโอกาสมาแลกเปลี่ยนประสบการณ์แล้วก็แชร์ประสบการณ์ตรงที่เราเจอกับหน้างานนะคะซึ่งอย่างที่นิเรียนไปเมื่อสักครู่คือเรา handle ปัญหาที่เป็น incident response หรือว่าเวลาเกิด ransom attack เนี่ยเราทำอย่างไรนะคะคำถามที่สตีฟพูดถึงเมื่อสักครู่เนี่ยเราจะมีการไขคำตอบกันในวันนี้นะคะส่วนตัวนี้เองก็อยู่ใน industry มากว่า15 ปีนะคะแล้วก็ involve ทางในเรื่องของการ build เรียกว่าทั้ง Cybersecurity แล้วก็ Infrastructure ให้กับลูกค้าในหลายๆองค์กรในประเทศนะคะแล้วก็เคยทำงานที่ทาง oversea ในต่างประเทศในประเทศเพื่อนบ้านเราด้วยนะคะก็นอกจากนี้นะคะเดี๋ยวเราคงมีเพื่อนร่วมงานของเราของนุ้ยเองอีกหลายๆท่านนะคะที่เรียกว่าอันนี้เป็นครั้งแรกเลยที่เราเอาแต่ละโดเมนของ Mandiant มาแชร์ทั้งในแง่ของ Threat Intel นะคะแต่งตัวซีฟเองเขาก็เป็น CTO คือจะมองภาพกว้างนะคะแล้วก็มีเรื่องของตัวMandiant Consulting Service ซึ่งอันนี้ก็จะทำเรื่องของ Incident Response รวมถึง Other Service เป็นหลักนะคะอีกด้านหนึ่งก็จะเป็นเรื่องของการช่วยลูกค้ามอนิเตอร์นะคะเหตุการณ์ที่มีโอกาสเกิดขึ้นความผิดปกติภายในองค์กรที่มีการเข้ามาแบบเงียบๆของแฮกเกอร์นะคะที่เราเรียกว่าเป็น Manage Defense and Response ก็จะมีทาง Vijay เข้ามานะคะงั้นก็วันนี้อยากให้ทุกท่านเก็บเกี่ยวข้อมูลให้ได้มากที่สุดนะคะเพราะว่าไม่รู้เมื่อไหร่จะรวมตัวกันได้แบบนี้อีกนะคะโอเค Steve over to you thank you so much
Thanks, Wei. Ihao, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So hi everybody, Sawadee Krap. My name is Ihao. I'm based in Singapore and I serve as the Threat Intel Advisor in APAC. So what I do from a day-to-day basis is essentially helping customers, could be enterprises, could be governments, derive greater value out of Intel. So a lot of times in APAC, a lot of the customers still think that Intel is still limited to just indicators of compromise, which is IOCs, in short like hashes or IP addresses. But there is so much more that you can derive out of Intel than these indicators itself. So I often give advice on how to create processes in-house or even do workshops with customers to help them to create in-house capability to process Intel. Right, thank you for having me here today and I'll pass on back to you, Steve.
Thanks, Ihao. Stephen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning. My name is Stephen Dasap. I take care of the Mandiant Consulting and Response Services. Typically, a lot of my work across the region, especially in Thailand, has been helping customers respond to breaches, advise executive teams, as well as in the recent past, help a lot of organizations test their defensive capabilities by launching very attacker simulated offensive actions. Especially with this whole push with ransomware. I'm happy to share insights about what I see, especially as I meet boards and CEOs as they're dealing with incidences. And hopefully there are a lot of questions that comes with the rest of the session about that. Very glad to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Stephen. Every time I see Stephen, he's on the phone helping a victim of cyber attack. So he's on the battleground at ground zero. He's got a really wealth of experience, and I'm sure he's got a lot to share with you. So please share your questions. For me, you've met me already. In my role as Chief Technology Officer, I help to advise the boards and the C-suite about not just how to respond to a cyber attack, but how not to get into that position in the first place. There's a lot that Mandiant does in addition to incident response in the area of proactive consulting services and also in the way of technologies as well. Vijay, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So my name is Vijay Velasco. I'm part of the managed defense team based out of Singapore. So my team is responsible for delivering threat hunting and rapid response services to our subscribed customers. So aside from those on a day-to-day basis, one of the things that I do is develop new threat hunting techniques and also analysis techniques that will aid us in investigating threats across our customer base. So looking forward to share more about managed defense, and thanks again for this opportunity. Back over to you, Steve.
Vijay is part of this managed defense team. You know, aside from responding to cyber attacks, a lot of organizations say, how can we make sure we don't get into that position? Can you monitor our organization 24/7/365? So managed defense is like the proactive version of incident response. And Vijay can share with us all about what that team does. So with that, let's jump into the panel questions. Interested to have the discussion begin.
Okay, so let's get started. From the first question will go to Yehao. Okay, so which adversaries' capability do you admire the most? Which one do you think that impressed you the most regarding the APT group?
Right. So I would say APT41 would be one of them. Few reasons for that. Firstly, APT41 is known to be one of the most prolific groups that attack multiple industries worldwide. And you know, the breadth of industries that they attacked is very broad. So from aerospace to hospitality to telecommunications to automotive, or oil and gas and education as such. So they, you know, to target different industries requires different skills because the way they're set up is different. There's certainly distinct differences between the regulations for each industry as such. So you must have a very deep understanding of the industries to begin to attack them and even steal something from them. And then the second reason why I think it's you know, quite impressive is that they are actually functioning as espionage actor in the day, and at night they do financially motivated activities. So they actually steal virtual credits or try to, you know, steal bitcoins, etc. in their off hours. And another reason why I think it's the third reason why I think it's impressive for them is because they actually are linked to a lot of front companies within China itself. So when they have front companies, they will actually, you know, pretend to operate as a business, and from there they interact with their partners, and from there they get information that might be sensitive that could be useful in their covert operations on the cyberspace. So it's a very big operation. It's a lot of coordination, and at the same time, it is state-backed. So there's some links to the government. And I just think that you know, we don't really see this kind of group very often in this part of the world because it requires a lot of sophisticated and disciplined operations and tactics that are being used by this group. Thank you, Captain Ramon.
Okay, so the next question is for Stephen D. Do we see APT41 and other state actors
in Asia, right? Nation state targeting, you know, a lot of the focus was more, this may be more toward Western geographies, more towards, you know, more the US. But in the past few years, we've seen a lot of APT targeting, especially APT41 in the region. I mean, I've seen them at least across 4 or 5 different countries in Asia. So that focus of, you know, nation state targeting into Asia has definitely been on the up and up. And you know, when Ihao mentioned about APT41, you know, a very prominent story that came to mind was how APT41 actually busted that myth about, you know, isolated systems. The Mandiant spoke about this, I think, a couple of years back. There was a tool that APT41 built called MessageTap. And we spoke about it publicly, so I'm happy to share about that. You know, MessageTap allowed for you know, APT41 to actually you know, conduct espionage activities on isolated telecom networks where they could, you know, pull in details about infrastructure. I mean, what messages were going across, and mostly, telecom infrastructure is considered to be isolated. You have this whole concept of air gap, but when you're dealing with these kind of threat actors, one thing that we've always been saying in Mandiant is dwell time, and attackers need that time in your environment. As they get longer in the environment, they can understand how your environment and operation works, and they can bypass. Truly, there are no air gap networks. You do need some sort of connectivity to patch and manage them. Just that whole operation where they got that access into what was thought to be a isolated environment was definitely very interesting. Now, I've seen other nation state actors also across Asia, so not just APT 41, the 41 groups that we're currently tracking, and a lot more that are still graduating to being nation state. Again, focusing on oil and gas, high tech, gaming, finance, some that may be close to where you're at. So, again, I won't name names, but this definitely is very prevalent. And it maps very closely to geopolitics, right? So as you see Belt and Road Initiative, you see the South China Sea tensions, you see summits. Very close to that, we also see an uptick in cyber activity, right? So very important as organizations to kind of keep that view now that as geopolitical messaging happens, do expect some of those fallouts into cyber, to affect organizations that are very marquee, especially in Thailand.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point that Stephen mentioned, right? And I mean, in terms of our Mandarin, I think how do we do like the APT hunting? Maybe Vijay, you want to take this?
Yeah, sure. Right. So in managed defense in particular, we hunt for APTs the way we hunt for all kinds of threats by applying our understanding of malware and attackers to raw data. So to enable for us to find evil. So we have hunt missions mapped to the MITRE ATT&CK framework and also adapted to real-time attacker behavior. So these hunt missions are designed to find new tactics, techniques, and procedures employed by the threat actors that we are tracking in Mandiant. So either through the managed defense customer environments, from Mandiant engagements, and also from intelligence information that we get from our Mandiant intel team.
Okay, that's quite interesting. I think we do have a lot of kind of threat hunting, which is part of the services that we offer, of course. And then, I mean, how you encounter to the APT 41 in this managed defense that we have within internal?
Yes, so we've been talking about APT 41 for a while, and this is quite special to me personally, because APT 41, the first malware family that I discovered is attributed to APT 41. So that was special. Unfortunately, that's not discussed publicly, but I can talk about how I found it. So I discovered that malware family while hunting at the AppCompat cache. So for those who are not familiar, the AppCompat cache or the shim cache, it's a Windows artifact that records evidence of execution. So while hunting, I found that this piece of malware that is a multi-purpose command line utility that can function as a backdoor, a tunneler, or even a credential harvester, depending on the arguments that you pass through it. So this is one of the most sophisticated piece of malware that I discovered personally and investigated, so that I will never forget that. So in managed defense, we identified APT 41 intrusions early this year and also last year in different industries like government, healthcare, education, and telecommunications. They are pretty active last year. If a lot of you will remember the exploitation of the Citrix NetScaler vulnerability, that was prolific last year. And that was around the time that the COVID-19 pandemic started. So it happened around that time. And it was a global intrusion campaign. So we observed them in organizations here in Southeast Asia and in Middle East, in the US, in South America, and also in the Europe organizations. So the pandemic didn't really stop APT41. And it was actually one of the broadest campaigns by a Chinese cyber espionage group that we are tracking for the past few years.
So are you saying that the technique and the TTPs they are using for different industry are changing each day and each time, evolving?
Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take this this question. Yeah, they keep evolving, and that's why we need to keep evolving as well. Not just from our reactive technologies like alerting, but also our hunting techniques. And that's what keeps me in my job, right? I need to keep developing these new hunting techniques because we have to get ahead, have to stay in the pace of our of these different threat actors, not just APT41.
Okay. That's how it works. And I'm sure that we use a lot of different teams like managed defense and also the threat intel within our team to actually make it work. I mean, it's like a seamless kind of, whole process, right?
Okay, we have interesting question from the audience to Steve. FireEye Mandiant have come playbook for customer, but I think the different customer will require different playbook to customize to their needs. So what are your suggestion for this the way to customize the playbook, Steve?
Yeah, I like this question, and I can answer it in a lot of ways. So I'll try and keep my answer short. But I would say, playbook. There are response playbooks, and so Mandiant, has so much practice with response. We can help coach on how to build those playbooks for your organization. That's one type of playbook. Another type of playbook is an alerting playbook, right? So the SOC sees something. How do I alert on that? And for that, Mandiant actually has a technology solution we call automated defense. And automated defense bakes in all the Mandiant expertise and decision making so that you can automate analysis. Now, I know this sounds similar to SOAR, security orchestration, automation, and response, but I would say SOAR automates SOC processes, right? Like notify this person, maybe enrich this alert, those sorts of processes to save time. What Mandiant Automated Defense does is it doesn't automate processes, it automates analysis. And because the way you do analysis is the same from organization to organization, we can pre-package that, pre-can that, and deliver that as Mandiant experience in software. So there's a bunch of different ways to do it. And we're happy to help explore further on that. Great question.
And one thing that I want to add as well, Captain Warren, is that the playbooks is actually have to, enhance and develop and evolve from time to time as well. You cannot just like have one playbook for over time, because as Vijay just mentioned, that the threat actors and the ransom is actually evolve themselves like each day. So that's pretty important for you to like look and revisit of what you currently have and then improve it from time to time. Yeah.
Okay. Next question for Yehao. We discussed about APT41 and you said it was state sponsors. So the question from our audience is that how can you be sure that it's the state sponsor and not just the cyber criminal?
Right. So I think this is a great question, and it's a question that we ask ourselves continuously as well, because they display different types of motivations. Sometimes they're after intellectual property and strategic intelligence. Sometimes they're after financial gains. But why would we think they are state sponsors? Because if you have noticed the US Department of Justice indictment, they actually reviewed several members of APT41. And then they also reviewed the use of several front companies and contractors for cyber operations. So we think there is a state-sponsored element in APT41 because the members that were reviewed in the indictment actually had close relations with security agencies in China itself. So these agencies include the People Liberation Army, the Ministry of State Security, and also the People's Armed Police and the Chengdu National Secrecy Bureau. So these are agencies which are government linked, and it is actually plausible that these guys actually have some sort of a position within those organizations, because having said that it is a government security function, a civilian cannot just have a position there or links to that organizations without any form of responsibilities or jobs, right? So there's definitely a state-sponsored element inside there, but it is such a big organization that we don't think it's 100% state-sponsored. We think it could be a front company that's operating on behalf of the state, but the state could have certain level of ownership or control over that organization itself.
Okay.
Maybe I'd like to add to that too. I want to make sure you have the right impression in your mind. So it's not like Mandiant gets called for help to respond to a cyber attack, and in that one cyber attack we say this is a nation state attack. We only come to those conclusions after many years and after seeing the threat actor attacking many victims. So we need to establish a pattern. It's not enough to just see one victim and do what we call attribution or point the finger at the attacker. We need to establish a pattern across many. So we've been tracking APT41 for many years. We've seen them attack many organizations, and it's that which gives us the confidence, all that correlated evidence, all the research and analysis done by our intelligence teams to help give us that confidence.
Okay, the next question. Let's change the tone from APT 41 for a minute and turn to something else. This one is for Stephen D. What roles do the CEO play during the breach, and how should the CEO react when we discover the breach?
That's a question that might take the whole hour. We'll try and keep it for a few minutes, right? The different types of organizations that I've encountered, organizations where the leadership has been prepared for cyber breaches, so they've gone through some of those experiences before. A lot of the decision making is either by committee, so there's like a lot of people involved. The CEO does take a lot of input, but those prepared CEOs that have gone through this exercise are very quick to make some, what I would say, impacting decisions, because a lot of the times people think that, well, it's a cyber issue, IT will be the one making the decision. But when we see, breaches and cyber incidents, IT usually is coming into that meeting with options, right? Saying, well, these are some options, and it is no longer an IT problem. It is now a business problem, and IT can help facilitate some of those solutions. InfoSec can provide some insight, but at the end of the day, I see the CEO playing a very important role, right? And a lot of times people say, well, breaches shouldn't this be a IT problem? Over the last 2 years, I would say, especially with the rise in ransomware and ransomware related incidents, they've moved from an IT problem to being acknowledged as a business response. Now, when I see organizations that are briefed and the executive team is briefed, one of the things that I see is the understanding that some of these things may take time, right? So the CEO and the executive team have a reasonable expectation of how long it would take to get some details, how long it would take in terms of timelines for next actions to happen, how long there could be a potential, impact to business and the acceptance for that, right? And most importantly, the questions that they are asking, the impact of that cyber observation. I've seen CEOs, and Ihao is, someone who we very regularly involved when we are dealing with breach and response, because as Kunui said earlier, the Mandiant ecosystem to help organizations involves consulting, intelligence, the MDR in terms of keeping operations operational while they're recovering from a breach. So the details from the intelligence teams becomes very important for CEOs. So I have had CEOs ask me, Stephen, do we know who is attacking us? And when that attribution, is this a financially motivated threat actor, a nation state threat actor, a ransomware affiliate, a ransomware affiliate who's had impact in Thailand? All of these make a huge impact in terms of how they make that decision. So when I've provided these details to the CEO and the board risk committee, they want to understand potentially what can this attacker do, what have they impacted before. And that intelligence context, you will see that the CEOs are more keen to find that because it helps them define the next actions. Now, unfortunately, there are also CEOs who have not gone through this whole preparation exercise. So they are also, in a bit of a emotional situation. Why is this happening to us? What have we done? Are we a victim? Did we cause some exposure? So I see the C-suite now playing a much bigger role. The reactions, again, very different, but I am seeing either regulation or board governance kind of mandating the C-suite to undertake some cybersecurity education, build some awareness, go through some simulations, and that has definitely helped them to be in a much prepared situation. So, keep my fingers crossed that when organizations do have a breach, the CEOs are prepared in terms of at least having an understanding of what they would be expecting from their teams over the next few weeks in terms of responding to that.
I think it's just want to jump in here and add some comments, right? I think nowadays the attacker is actually know who to reach out to when things happen. They're no longer to the going to the IT team, cybersecurity team. They actually hit to the right person, which is the CEO. And for that matter, we'll see that most of the CEO never gone through this exercise or preparation. So they kind of like, in panic of what to be respond. And they said, okay, pay me this amount of money. Otherwise, your data will be leaked for this amount, right? And this impact your whole operation. So I think it's pretty important. And I agree with Stephen that we need to prep our CEO. We need to prep not just the CEO, but all the C-suite, like the legal team, the PR team, the CFO, because if there is a case that you need to pay, then when to make a decision, right? So this whole process is not just technical team anymore. It's more on the C-level, and the understanding of having all the information gathering together is the most important when they need to make a decision whether they need to pay or not pay, because this is a business decision. As Mandiant, we will not be able to say that, okay, you have to pay or you're not paying, but be prepared and provide all the relevant information for the organization to make the decision.
Yeah, and just one more note, bearing in mind that the payment is not done in cash, it's always in cryptocurrencies. So the CFO has to be ready to hedge. When do you buy cryptocurrencies, given that the prices are going so volatile these days? So it's a very complex question that once again, all the C-suites have to be involved. Okay, back to you,
that's
Captain
very
Ahmad.
interesting because when we say cyber drill, usually it's for the IT staff. But I think to answer those questions, it might be better for CEO and the team at the C level to join in with cyber drill as well, so that they will be prepared in response to such an event. Okay. Next question for.
Yeah, sorry, Captain Ahmad, I think it just came to my mind that, and one of the questions that we always receive from the organization is that, how much is this exercise will be cost? How much you need to pay for this preparation, right? I think it's I have some kind of comparison. Maybe Stephen, you can jump in anytime, right? So it's like you're going to the doctor doing the diagnosis for your whole body, right? So you will not know how much you have to pay. If you feel like you're sick, right? You have stomachache, doesn't mean that you have to scan only your stomach, right? You probably go to your liver, you probably go to your, other organs. So I mean, it will not be stopped until you know, like you already scanned the whole body, right? So it's very hard to say that, okay, this amount of money is for the preparation. Yes, you can have a starting point, but at the end of the day, it depends on how much scope, how much comprehensive you want to get for your organization.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's very hard to remember the first slide I showed. When a breach happens, you have more questions than answers. You're not going to know what's wrong. You're not going to know if the attacker has been in there for one day, in which case it's an easy problem to fix, or you're not going to know if the attacker has been in there for many months, in which case they will have grown roots and it'll be very hard to fix. So it's hard to just show up and immediately know how big the problem is. That's an iterative process, right? Slowly facts will reveal themselves. And that's what Stephen Desa does with incident response, is to uncover those piece by piece. We learn more, we understand more, and address them. And the hospital is a good analogy. Sometimes you may do a treatment, maybe the treatment works, maybe not, right? Maybe you then need a different treatment. So it's a process.
Okay, now back to Vijay. This now change the tone to a technical question. Okay, so for Vijay, you are the expert for managed defense or managed defense hunting. So can you explain to us or discuss about what's the most notable managed defense hunting experience? Which case is most impressive to you for managed defense hunting?
All right, let's get to it. So yeah, so for me, I've been involved in a lot of hunting activities. We discovered a lot of interesting hunting finds, but the one that stands out to me the most at the moment is the time when we discovered this piece of malware called Dubin. So while we are performing proactive threat hunting on a customer environment, we identified suspicious network traffic to a remote IP address that Mandiant is tracking. So in managed defense, reviewing network traffic to attacker infrastructure is one of the hunting techniques that we employ. And this is driven by intel, right? Without knowing that this is a threat actor IP or has been something that we observed in the past, we won't be monitoring this IP address. So that hunting find was driven by our intel on this IP address. And we identified that in one of our customer environments. So we investigated further and we determined that that traffic was a result of a successful phishing attack on this customer environment that resulted in the deployment of a malware that was previously unnamed, but we later called Dubin. So Dubin is a piece of malware that leverages a legitimate antivirus executable to load a DLL via DLL side loading. So you can see in the malware author's mind, like, okay, you're an antivirus executable, I'm going to use you to load my malware. And it also uses Windows services to maintain persistence on victim hosts. And they use legitimate looking service names, service descriptions to blend in with legitimate services. So our team, we continued sending notifications to our customers about this new threat, this new piece of malware that we discovered. And at the same time, in the background, we continued analyzing data to identify similar activities in our customers. And that investigation led to an activity that we identified in another customer, a Southeast Asian telecom. And the firm was targeted with more than a dozen emails coming from a single same sender address. So that sender address, that email, those phishing emails, they contain themes on new network strategy and VPN. And the attachments contain a malicious link file, which led us to the delivery of not a new malware family, but a new malware delivery technique that we call chain link. So chain link involves an email attachment with a link extension. And so that link extension, that link file contains obfuscated PowerShell commands. So it uses the Microsoft Word icon to trick the victim to open it. And when the attachment is opened, the PowerShell script executes and decodes those PowerShell commands, and that drops the Dubin components on disk. So what happens here is that effectively defeated traditional email scanning technologies, because those technologies, they usually scan for binaries or executables. But since it's using Chainlink, they will be scanning for a huge text file with just long PowerShell command. So no traditional email security procedures or technologies was able to detect Chainlink. So we also discovered this was then an active attacker campaign that was targeting different industries here in Southeast Asia. One other notable, I think, fun fact for this engagement was in one of the targeted organizations, their corporate email security systems are already blocking Dubean, right? Because they're using FireEye Mandiant technology. We already detected that and blocked those emails. So you know what the attacker did? They targeted the attacker. They tried to exploit the path of least resistance, which is one of the users' free web-based email. Right? So they sent phishing emails through the free web-based email that one of the victim organization uses. And so what happened is that because they're using that, Dubean was not blocked, and the victim was infected with Dubean. And through that just one email that went through their defenses, the attacker was able to perform reconnaissance and stage stealing Active Directory data on the customer's victim machine. So that's it. That's really from just one hunting find, it led to a big attacker campaign, and we discovered different activities from different customer environments that we wouldn't have detected if we were not hunting.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Another question regarding cyber threat intel or intelligence. This one is for Yihao. Can you share a case study on how intelligence can be used in incident response?
Sure. So,
Ihao, just let me elaborate a little bit, right? Because most of the time, I think threat intel is like perceived as the knowledge that you have to get in and, you know, collect the data, understand the technique, tools and procedure of the hackers. But I mean, most of the people might not know that we can use it for incident response as well. So this is very interesting questions, right?
Cool. Yes. So I have many stories to share, and I work with Stephen closely on many of those. I think one of those that are very memorable for me would be once we actually saw a Russian-speaking attacker advertising access to one of the conglomerates in Singapore. Right. So as mentioned by Steve earlier, we went on this victim notifications route and service where we notified the victim, who was not a Mandiant customer at that time, to tell them that, you know, we saw this actor selling access to your company, and we want to let you know, notify you about this. So immediately they wanted us to help them to locate the compromised asset. Right. Initially, it was just one line of text saying that I have access to this company. Please reach out to me if you want to buy. So we engaged our dark web researchers who had interactions with the actor, and we managed to get more information about the compromised asset, because sometimes these actors are just making claims that are false. Right. They just pretend that I have access to ABC company, but it is not true. They just want to make themselves seem experienced or legitimate. So we managed to engage them and confirm that the asset, compromise is valid and is real. We got screenshots, and we communicated that screenshots over to the victim, and we told them what does this screenshot means, what systems you should look for, what are the times that the attacker took the screenshot, because there was a timestamp. And based on that, the victim was able to work with us and Stephen's team to identify the compromised asset. Okay, and they very quickly identified the compromised asset, and they isolated the asset, and they managed to kick the attacker out eventually. Right, but I think this is a great value of how Intel can provide, a lot of assistance in incident response, because number one, if we didn't have Intel, they would not even know that they had a compromise. Number two, if we didn't have the screenshots, they will not know which systems to scan, because the conglomerate is huge. They have like 30,000 machines. They don't know which ones to look for. Number three, even if they know which ones to look for, the logs are, kept in, I think, 60 or 90 days. to look through one line by line is too much effort. It will take up too much time for them to do that. And we were able to give them the timestamp, and they were able to very quickly verify that and confirm that this IP is malicious, and they were able to kick him out eventually. So I think this is one of the most memorable experiences where we really helped them to very quickly identify and then isolate the attacker.
Yeah, to add to one of the stories, Captain Ramon, that Ihao shared, there was another case where I worked with Ihao, and this is a few years back. We were briefing the executive committee of one of these customers who was impacted. And one of the questions was, who are we dealing with, right? And that intelligence was very important. So we found a tool called Cold Steel. This tool was a tunneler. It had the capability to also backdoor. So this was, a tool that had gone through some improvements. Now, the interesting thing about that tool, which the entire team provided to us, was this is not a public tool. So this is purpose built for intrusions, right? And they had seen these intrusions with a group which was then linked to the APT-19, targeting a very specific industry. And I see, that context is very important for the executive team to say, are we dealing with, hey, this is probably someone who managed to just get in and, they deployed some tool, versus this tooling is purpose-built. This is not public. So someone has spent the effort to build something that's very specific to our environment. We are going to be dealing with a more sustained intrusion campaign. Now, the GM for that business took a call saying that, we had budgeted probably only about $250,000 to deal with, the whole fallout of this incident. But knowing that we're dealing with a nation state threat actor at this point means that this is not, something that we can go with just minimal resources. And they went back and, reevaluated the decision. It took them a few months to clean up the environment and, recover. But that context from Ihao's team on who they're dealing with, based of indicators, based of facts, based of, that context of what has happened elsewhere, plays a very important role in terms of prioritizing how much resources, and maybe whether you involve, cybersecurity agencies as well, from within the government, to let them know that you're dealing with a nation state threat actor. These are very important aspects. So, wherever you can use intelligence to make that or expedite or, contextualize the decision making, we definitely would recommend that, especially more important when you're dealing with an IR.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you, Stephen.
The next question is for Steve. You have seen a lot of ransomware in the past, and I think you have seen a lot of evolution, how it developed over the years. So will you please share with us what the process for encryption and how they ask for ransom money? Okay, so that will be see to understand it more how it's happening now.
Yeah, I think ransomware is on the top of everyone's mind. It seems like almost every week there's a new type of ransomware threat. And you're right, it's evolved a lot. In fact, it's evolved so much that at Mandiant, we don't even call it ransomware anymore. We call it multifaceted extortion. Let me share my screen so you can see a visual of how we think of multifaceted extortion. Sometimes you hear this new type of ransomware called double extortion, but I think it's more than double. There's more than two things that threat actors are doing now. So they still have the ransom encryption, right? And sometimes they'll encrypt servers. They're doing that post-compromise, which means they're first breaking into the network, finding those important servers, and then manually encrypting those critical servers. Because they're doing it manually, they do it off hours. And it's not just limited to the IT networks, right? We've seen multiple instances now where OT networks, critical infrastructure networks, have been under attack by ransomware. There's also the element of data theft. And so while they're broken into that network, it's not just should I encrypt the data, they steal the data. And sometimes that's PII, personal identifiable information. Sometimes it's intellectual property, could be payroll information, could be an executive's emails, could be healthcare information, anything that's sensitive to the organization. And then instead of selling it, right? Selling it would have been the old way, right? Instead of trying to sell that data, these ransomware actors find it a lot more profitable to extort the victim, saying, we know this data is sensitive, we're going to publish it unless you pay us not to, right? And so that's the second aspect. The third aspect is around shaming the victims. So once they publish the information, they'll reach out to local news sources, right? And so that the media knows that this organization had a breach and lost data. We've seen the threat actors reach out to regulators. We've seen the threat actors reach out directly to the customers of the victim. Because they've broken in, they've stolen the data, they know who the customers are. They email the customers and say, hey, you should be writing to this company and demanding they protect your privacy, right? So in a way, these threat actors turn their victims' own customers against them. And in some cases, we've seen these same threat actors threaten distributed denial of service attacks on top of everything else. So imagine all of this happening all at once to an organization. That's what the attackers want. So they have the most points of leverage so that when they ask for a $1 million or $5 million ransom, they're taken seriously because the consequences are, are extremely devastating for these companies. So we call this evolution from ransomware to multifaceted extortion. And Mandiant just held a webinar on this last night, multifaceted extortion. I'll try and find the link and put the link to the multifaceted extortion webinar in chat for you all. Thank you.
Since you're also talking about the incident response, I think one of the questions that came in is that, how the incident response is actually intersect with the incidents, the crisis management and crisis communication. Maybe Stephen?
Let me take this one, right? So, see a lot, again, goes back to one of the points I was making earlier, right? That, when you're doing incident response, it's not just an IT fix, right? I was talking to an executive 2 days back, and one of the things that they mentioned was, if they observed threat actor activity that was, in their environment, and they needed to perform some sweeping actions in their environment, the CFO suggestion was reduce exposure, right? Reduce exposure. So let's take everything offline. Right? IT said, sure, I can flip a switch, we can go offline. And the comms person said, no, we can't do that, because if you take that offline, there are about 6 applications that are customer facing that are going to have like a major outage, and we have to notify the regulator, we have to notify our partners, we have to notify stakeholders, and we can't make that decision as a flip switch, right? So when we start thinking about IR and communication, business communication has a lot of challenges which needs to be prepared for. And if they're not prepared for, while the IT and the IS team can help, the business operations impact sometimes cannot, right? And if you think about it, cyber crisis IR or cyber or IR related crisis comms is very different from BCP crisis comms. Because in a BCP situation, you're expecting everyone to be aware. You can see that as an incident. So in this case, the CFO suggested, why don't we just call this an emergency maintenance update, and we'll be down for 6 hours, and let's do our analysis. Again, unprepared customer, very different timeline expectations. The comms person said, well, fine, you'll put that communication. We know that there is a potential, attacker in the environment. We're going to identify that. If there is a breach, tomorrow our message from emergency update or emergency planned update is going to go to saying that we had a data breach. And that change in communication is going to confuse our customers, because at what point are we, speaking the truth? So especially when you're doing IR, that crisis comms part becomes very, very, I would say, nuanced. So you need to plan that based off that IR situation. So if someone's broken in, your communication is very different, because now you're a victim. If you have exposed something because there was a lack of configuration, so you lost information because of there was either human error, the crisis comms are very different. Now we get called into both kind of incident responses, because you don't know if this was an internal actor or an external actor. So very important that you establish what details you're looking for, right? I'll give you another example. When we talk about Singapore, there is the Data Privacy Commission. They have a very clear threshold. Anything over 500 records, you need to make a notification. So when we do incident response exercises, the question is it 500 or more, right? Because the crisis comms people want to know that, because then that would trigger communication. If it is GDPR, it is saying, do we have European related details that affect individuals, yes or no? Because then that triggers your 72-hour response from the time that you've already identified that. So as these teams come together in terms of planning for incident response, crisis communication can also provide insights as to what the direction of the investigation should be, to help them with some threshold to start planning for reporting. If they don't have that, they don't have those specifics, crisis communications can be very handicapped. So, this is again one of our recommendations, to have organizations look at incident response as beyond IT and get all of the other business functions together, right? And Kunui has, very, very nicely articulated that earlier. It's PR, it's internal comms, which is HR, it's anyone in external comms, regulatory and compliance, and then legal, obviously, to make sure that whether you need to get external counsel or whether internal counsel itself can confirm that communication to go out.
Yeah, so it's quite important having like all the party into the preparation and practice, simulate the situation, so that they know what to do, they know what to communicate. Because I think Stephen made the right point that when things happen, if you're not really prepared a conversation, you don't know what to communicate. Is very, very hard work for the rest of the team, especially management to launch and publish the news, right? Yeah. Okay. Good. Thanks so much, Stephen.
Okay. Next question is for Vijay. It will be two parts of the question. When you do the managed defense hunting, have you ever discovered the active attackers during the incident, or have you ever discovered zero-day vulnerability during the managed defense process?
Yes, thank you for that question. So yeah, we do find active attackers through hunting. It's actually one of the kind of hunting finds that we found interesting and challenging at the same time. So managed defense, we leverage both real-time and historical data sources for our hunting techniques. And there are many cases where we found active attackers, right? So I already talked about Dewey a while ago, where we discovered an active attacker campaign. And yeah, there are also a lot of cases where we identified active attackers. So one of them would be when we discovered undetected Cobalt Strike activities on one of our customers. So during that time, it was delivered to a phishing email that was masquerading as the customer's IT portal. So I know it's not interesting because it's Cobalt Strike, it's not a new malware family. But what happened is that when we pivoted on the SSL certificates that was used by the Cobalt Strike C2 and the phishing link, we were able to find another IP address that is hosting that SSL certificate. And by monitoring that IP address, we found another Cobalt Strike intrusion on another of our customers. And not only that, we were able to pivot on public network data sources such as Census and Shodan. And we tracked the IP address, the domains, the SSL certificates used by the attacker. And this is where we discovered that the attacker infrastructure was hosting multiple recently registered domains that are masquerading as multiple telecommunications companies globally, right? So by using the public data sources, we discovered a widespread and active attacker campaign just through one detection, hunting find on one of our customers. So that was big for us because there's a few lessons learned here, not just having the expertise and intel, but also knowing how to fully leverage the capabilities of public data sources or tools like Sensis and Shodan to identify other attacks. And also a widespread attacker campaign like this is very important. And the next question, right? You asked if we have discovered zero-day vulnerabilities in managed defense. Yes, we do. And it was, yes, we did. So, right. So one of the most memorable, something that it lives to me up to this day, was when we discovered the zero-day vulnerability in Adobe Flash, right? So there's one time one of our managed defense analysts was responding to alerts, right? Not to hunting, not an incident response engagement, just through alerts on a malware that was discovered, that was detected on the customer environment. So we reported that, right? After reporting, he continued digging further, looking back on how it was delivered, finding out what was the initial vector. And through his investigation, he identified that it was delivered through a phishing link that is hosting an Adobe Flash object, right? So if you just click that Adobe Flash object, it will deliver the malware right away. There's no further interaction needed. And through his investigation, he also found that the machine, the victim machine, was running the latest version of Adobe Flash. And that's how we discovered that. That's a zero-day Flash vulnerability that was pretty big because it also identified an active attacker campaign. So from that hunting find, we scanned our customer base for that Adobe Flash vulnerability that was zero-day at the moment. And we identified multiple customers being targeted by that Flash zero-day. And then just recently early this year, we managed defense identified post-exploitation activity on one of our customers. And through that investigation, we started digging. We found that web shell, the post-exploitation activity was a web shell deployed on a SonicWall email security application. And through our investigation, we found that this application, the version of SonicWall, is running the latest version of SonicWall, and there's no publicly available information about vulnerabilities in that version, and there's no publicly known exploitation of that version. And that's when we continued digging, finding out how the web shell was placed. And by looking at application logs, we identified that there's an attacker that sent a specially crafted XML data that created that web shell on the host. And that's how we found that it's a zero-day, and not just one. We actually discovered three zero-day vulnerabilities on that victim host, and we responsibly notified SonicWall about that before blogging about it.
Okay, that's very exciting and adventurous.
Yes,
in line of work. Okay, we have two more questions. One is for Yihao. The classic question when something happened regarding cyber incident, usually people will discuss about IP address. And in our line of work, we think that's not enough. Usually there might be something else. So could you share with us, how do you investigate and do attribution based on the IP address or any additional information that you will try to find who's behind the incident?
Right. So it is a very broad question, but I'll try to shorten my answer for this. How do we do attribution actually goes back to what Steve mentioned earlier, that we actually take a very iterative approach over a long period of time. For example, in Mandiant, when we start to do attribution, when we observe a new attack activity, we don't immediately jump into the conclusion that this is China just because the IP address is from China, because we know there's VPNs, etc. And it's very easy to masquerade where you're coming from. So that's number one. So what we do when we observe a new attack is to classify that as an attack cluster first. So having said that, the attack cluster will be one evidence of activity that we see against, and we take note of all these details against the target. Which country is it in? What industry are they in? What did the target, what did the attacker take? Were they after information, intellectual property, or money? And also the time of intrusion, because the time zone will roughly estimate what is operating time for the attacker itself, right? Could be in Eastern Europe, and then the time zone could be a bit different. So all these actually are points that we consider whenever we observe an attack. And over time, if we observe continued pattern of the same attack, for example, if the attacker used back the same tools, if the attacker reused the same infrastructure, all right, in this case, could be IP, could be C2, or attackers reuse the phishing lures because they create one email to phish multiple targets at one time, right? So these are clues that let us to think this attack cluster and this attack cluster might be linked. And having said that, over a period of time, usually 3 to 4 years, we will then, gradually see this cluster growing and growing. And that's how we eventually attribute them to either a certain financial crime group or a nation-backed group. So this is actually a very long process. Of course, I'm just giving it very short explanation, but that is how we actually consider all sorts of data available at our disposal. So it's a game of the more data, the merrier, because the more you have on what exactly happened, helps you to understand and determine actually who is actually behind this attack. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. So basically, you need more than the IP address. You need to collect more data. Yeah. Okay. And also, one last question on the list, but very important one. Okay, this one is for Stephen D. So what are the considerations for ransomware recovery? Because now we know that restore from backup is not the answers. We need to do a lot more. So could you please share with us what would be another additional step for ransomware recovery?
Very, very important question, but I'll again try to keep this very limited. See, most organizations look at ransomware recovery as restoration, right? You just rebuild the system and then you're restoring the data. A lot of the times you realize that the attacker may have had other backdoors. The investigations obviously are helping you with some of those details, but the way to fix that is about going and looking at what are the different attack paths that the attacker had access to, and what would be certain configuration gaps that would allow the attacker access back into the environment. So rebuild is not recover, right? It's very important to understand. So you can rebuild and then you can restore, but that is not recover. Recovery still needs, remediate, right? And remediate needs to know those activities from investigation. So whenever organizations are planning, I tell them, think about first step is contain. The attackers in your environment, you try to contain wherever you can, your crown jewels, your most important infrastructure, right? Then you are starting an investigation process, but you start your preparation for recovery. So you start your restore, your rebuild, but all of that has to be done in a green zone, a clean environment. So you're doing that in an isolated environment. Then you're doing your preparation for remediation, which most people think is eradication, you're kicking the attacker out, but you're doing your remediation, but that cannot happen overnight. You are planning because there is a lot of, hey, can I reduce these accounts? Can I reduce these GPOs? Attackers are using a lot of these configuration excessive permissions. So those steps of, preparation for remediation is important, right? And then the last part is, you're recovering and you're getting it ready to go into production, but you're still doing one last pass to make sure that there were no human errors, from what you have done, because a lot of these things you're doing in a very short period of time. So contain, in your restore, you start your rebuild and recover. Very important is remediate. And then you actually come to your last part, which is recovery, going back to operations. So hopefully that gives a good structure as you plan with ransomware. This is not something that's going away. I think Steve and all of us, we've spoken extensively about this. Through 2021, we expected ransomware to be on the rise, to the first 8 months, 9 months of the year. If that is any indication, that has already come true, and we don't expect this to go away. So planning for this recovery would definitely be very helpful for organizations to undertake.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think you have provided us with very important word there. You need to remediate. It's like when you are sick, okay, you cannot just recover or rebuild the system. You have to find the cause of the breach or the way that hacker got in first, and then try to remediate that. It could be on the technical side or the process side. That's something to be considered, and we could find out about it after the investigation. Okay, I think that's it for the time and the list of questions. And I know all the audience will learn a lot from this very well put together group of Mandiant team, and we would like to thank Kun Nui that have to put such effort to put together the great team of Mandiant to provide with such insightful information. Lastly, I would like to invite General Dr. Prachya to provide a closing remark. Please, sir.
Before closing, I'd like to thank experts and executives from Mandiant. We learn a lot from your experiences. ก็ขอบคุณทุกท่านที่ให้มารับฟังนะครับในการ knowledge sharing ครั้งนี้ถือว่าเป็นครั้งที่ค่อนข้างที่จะมีข้อมูลที่เป็นประโยชน์มากนะครับแล้วก็จริงๆแล้วเนี่ยถ้ามันสถานการณ์ปกติเนี่ยถ้าเราสามารถที่จะจัดงานในระดับใหญ่ๆแล้วก็น่าจะคาดว่าน่าจะมีผู้ที่เข้าชมนะครับเยอะกว่านี้นะครับแต่อย่างไรก็ตามก็ขอบคุณทุกท่านนะครับสวัสดีครับ
ครับสวัสดีครับ Okay, and at the end, if you want more information, please don't be hesitate to reach out to the team here.
Can I just leave one comment? Yeah, so I know that we are on over the time, but again, right, I think incident response, ransomware monitoring is like we doing the fire drills, right? So when we do the fire drill, it's very important for you to look into like the process, like whether you have the plans and you know where is the steps where you can escape, or like the people have to be communicate when it's happened, how you send the alarm to the rest of the people, who are those that have to be involved. And especially technology is very important. It's not about how many technology you have, but it's about how information and data you can take from those technology and make use of it. So I think it's very important. We talk a lot about like people, process, technology, but it's very important to really understand and realize how important of each of the domain. This is something that I like to leave it with. And of course, again, I would like to thank you again to General Dr. Prachya and Captain Amon having us here. We are very honored to be here. Joining the event and sharing our expertise from the front line. Everyone is actually on the field. They are not salesperson except me. And we are not talking about sales. We are talking about like how we handling the things, how we manage and monitor and helping the customer day by days. So feel free to reach out to me and the rest of the team whenever you need some help and assess, okay? Or even just recommendation, advice, we are here to help. Yeah.
And Nui, I'll just add one more quick mention. One of the things we do is we help to raise awareness to boards and to senior management. And we often find that the CIOs and the CISOs that we work with, they appreciate that. because of Mandiant's experience, we can help the business understand how serious cyber is. And so if that's something that we would like, you would like us to help you with, just let us know. We do this all the time, and we have a local team in Thailand that can help you in that area. There's a QR code here you can use to contact us, or just reach out to us at apac@fireeye.com. Thank you so much. And I hope you found this event useful and informative. We have just a short 3-question feedback survey. We'd love to hear how we can improve for the next sharing with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone.
you,
Have
everyone.
a great day. Okay. Bye bye. สวัสดีครับ
Bye bye.
สวัสดี
สวัสดี
ค
ค
รั
รั
บบ
สวัสดีครับ
ค่ะ
ครับเดี๋ยว
Thank you,
เรา
everyone.
จะทิ้งลิงก์เอาไว้นะครับ เพื่อให้ทุกท่านได้เข้าไปตอบคำถามนะครับ แล้วก็ในส่วนของตัวแบบฟอร์มที่เป็นฟีดแบ็กนะครับ ก็ขอบพระคุณสปีกเกอร์ทุกท่านนะครับ Thank you very much for panelists. We will leave the QR code here for a few minutes for everyone to take a photo and join with the feedback form. Okay, but thank you very much. Okay, bye bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.
Everyone. Bye.